Everyone knew Drill Sergeant Maria Santos couldn't speak, but nobody knew why. For 10 years, she had trained recruits in complete silence, using methods that were more effective than traditional drill sergeant techniques. The truth about her silence was classified at the highest levels, because the mission that stole her voice had never officially happened, and the soldiers who died were never supposed to exist. Fort Benning's most feared drill sergeant had never uttered a single word in the 10 years she had been training new recruits. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos communicated entirely through hand signals, written commands, and a physical presence so intimidating that grown men would break down crying without her ever raising her voice. Because she couldn't raise her voice, she had no voice at all. Which city in the world are you watching this video from today? Please subscribe and support us for more stories. Maria's training methods were unlike anything in military doctrine. She could reduce cocky recruits to tears with nothing more than a stare and a gesture. Her silent commands were followed more precisely than shouted orders from other drill sergeants. New arrivals to Fort Benning would hear whispered stories about the silent drill sergeant who could break your spirit without saying a word, but nobody knew the real reason behind her silence. The official military medical records listed Maria's condition as combat-related laryngeal trauma, a generic designation that covered various types of throat injuries sustained during deployment. Her personnel file indicated that she had been wounded during operations in Afghanistan and had lost the ability to speak due to injuries sustained in the line of duty. The records were filed under routine combat casualties and attracted no special attention from military medical administrators. What the official records didn't reveal was that Maria Santos had not lost her voice due to physical injury. Her silence was self-imposed, the result of a promise she had made during the worst night of her military career, a night that officially never happened during a mission that was never acknowledged by any government agency. Maria's real story began 3 years before she became a drill sergeant, when she was a communications specialist assigned to a classified special operations unit, conducting missions that existed in the gray areas between military action and intelligence operations. Her team was tasked with operations that required complete deniability, missions where American involvement could never be acknowledged if they were discovered or went wrong. The unit that Maria served with was known only by the designation Echo 7, and their existence was compartmentalized to such a degree that even within the special operations community, few people knew about their activities. The 12 operators who comprised Echo 7 were hand-selected for their skills, psychological stability, and willingness to accept assignments that came with no official recognition or support. Maria's role as communications specialist made her the lifeline between Echo 7 and their handlers, responsible for maintaining contact with command during operations and coordinating support when things went wrong. Her voice was literally the connection that kept the team alive, the radio link that could summon extraction, medical support, or backup when missions became compromised. The mission that changed everything began in October 2011, when Echo 7 was tasked with eliminating a high-value target who was coordinating terrorist attacks against American military installations throughout Afghanistan. The target was operating from a compound in a region where American military presence was not officially acknowledged, making conventional military action impossible. Echo 7's mission was to infiltrate the compound, eliminate the target, and extract without leaving any evidence of American involvement. The operation was planned to look like an internal conflict between rival terrorist groups, providing complete deniability for American involvement while removing a significant threat to military personnel. Maria's position during the mission was at a forward operating base, approximately 40 miles from the target compound, where she maintained communications with the infiltration team and coordinated with extraction assets that would retrieve the operators after the mission was completed. Her radio was the only link between Echo 7 and the outside world once they began their infiltration. The mission began routinely, with Echo 7 reporting successful insertion and beginning their approach to the target compound. Maria maintained regular contact as the team moved through their planned route, tracking their progress and coordinating with helicopter assets that were standing by for extraction. Everything proceeded according to plan for the first 4 hours of the operation. The first indication that something had gone wrong came when Echo 7 reported that the target compound was not what intelligence had indicated. Instead of a small facility housing a terrorist leader and a few bodyguards, they had found a major training camp with over 200 armed militants. The intelligence that had been used to plan the mission was either outdated or deliberately misleading. Echo 7 found themselves surrounded by a force that outnumbered them more than 15 to 1, with no possibility of completing their original mission and limited options for extraction. The team leader requested immediate backup and evacuation, but Maria was forced to inform them that extraction assets were too far away to provide immediate assistance and that backup forces could not be deployed without revealing American involvement in the operation. The situation deteriorated rapidly as Echo 7 was discovered by camp security and came under attack from militants who had superior numbers and knowledge of the local terrain. The team was forced to take defensive positions in a partially constructed building that provided limited cover but no possibility of escape without fighting through hundreds of armed enemies. Maria's role during the crisis became the most crucial and heartbreaking of her military career. She was the voice that Echo 7 heard as they fought for their lives, the person who coordinated their attempts to find escape routes, and the one who had to deliver increasingly desperate news about delays in extraction and the impossibility of sending immediate reinforcement. Over the next 8 hours, Maria listened as Echo 7 fought against overwhelming odds with no possibility of victory or escape. She heard every gunshot, every explosion, and every radio transmission as the 12 operators were gradually killed one by one. Her voice was the last human contact that many of them had before they died, and she was forced to maintain communications even as she listened to her teammates being killed. The worst part of Maria's experience was not just listening to her teammates die, but being the person who had to deliver information that made their situation hopeless. She was forced to tell them that extraction was impossible, that backup wasn't coming, and that they were essentially abandoned in a situation where survival was impossible. Her voice carried the news that destroyed any hope they might have had. As the night progressed and Echo 7's situation became increasingly desperate, Maria began receiving instructions from her commanding officers that she knew were impossible to implement. She was ordered to direct the team toward extraction points that were controlled by enemy forces, to coordinate with support assets that didn't exist, and to maintain morale among soldiers who were clearly doomed. The final hours of the battle were the most devastating. As Maria listened to the last 3 survivors of Echo 7 discussing their situation and making final preparations for death, they knew they weren't going to survive, and they used their radio communications with Maria to record final messages for families who would never be told how their loved ones had died. The last survivor, Team Leader Sergeant First Class David Park, used his final radio transmission to make Maria promise that she would never speak about the mission or the circumstances of their deaths. He told her that their families deserved to believe they had died heroes in an acknowledged military operation, rather than learning they had been abandoned during a mission that officially never happened. Park's final words to Maria were a request that she maintain silence about Echo 7 until she found a way to ensure that their sacrifice would be properly honored and their families would receive the recognition and benefits they deserved. He made her promise that her voice would not be used to lie about their deaths or to perpetuate the official story that they had never existed. Maria's promise to maintain silence was made while listening to the final gunshots that killed the last member of Echo 7, ending a battle that had lasted over 8 hours and resulted in the deaths of 12 highly trained operators who had been abandoned by the very government they had sworn to serve. Her voice was the last thing they heard before they died, and she swore it would be the last thing anyone would hear from her until she found justice for their sacrifice. The aftermath of the Echo 7 mission was handled with the same compartmentalization and secrecy that had characterized the original operation. The 12 operators were officially listed as killed in action during a routine patrol that encountered unexpected enemy resistance. Their families were told that their loved ones had died heroes defending American interests, but they were not given details about the circumstances of their deaths. Maria's own role in the mission was classified and compartmentalized, with her communications records sealed and her assignment to Echo 7 erased from her official military personnel file. She was reassigned to routine duties and underwent psychological evaluation that focused on her trauma response rather than the specific circumstances that had caused her condition. The psychological evaluation that Maria underwent following the Echo 7 mission revealed that she was suffering from severe post-traumatic stress related to her communications role during the operation. Military psychologists noted that she had stopped speaking entirely and communicated only through written notes, but they attributed her muteness to combat trauma rather than a conscious decision to maintain silence. Maria's silence was so complete and convincing that military medical personnel assumed she had suffered physical or psychological damage that prevented her from speaking. They provided various treatments designed to restore her voice, including speech therapy, psychological counseling, and medical interventions, but Maria never responded to any attempts to help her regain her ability to speak. What military medical staff didn't understand was that Maria's silence was not a symptom of trauma, but a deliberate choice to honor the promise she had made to the dying members of Echo 7. She maintained her muteness as a form of protest against the system that had abandoned her teammates and a commitment to find some way to ensure their sacrifice would be properly acknowledged. Maria's assignment as a drill sergeant came about partly by accident and partly because her superiors believed that the structure and purpose of training new recruits might help her recover from her combat trauma. The assignment was intended to be therapeutic, providing her with meaningful work that didn't require verbal communication while giving her time to heal from her psychological wounds. The methods that Maria developed for training recruits without speaking proved to be extraordinarily effective and demonstrated that silence could be more powerful than shouting in certain training situations. Her techniques relied on physical demonstration, written instruction, and psychological pressure that was more intense than traditional verbal abuse, because recruits couldn't predict or prepare for her responses. Maria's silent training methods became legendary within Fort Benning, with drill sergeants from other units studying her techniques and attempting to understand how she achieved such remarkable results without ever speaking. Her success rate in transforming civilian recruits into disciplined soldiers was higher than that of drill sergeants who used traditional verbal methods. What made Maria's training methods so effective was not just her silence, but the intensity and focus that her condition brought to every interaction with recruits. She had learned to communicate volumes through facial expressions, body language, and written commands that were more precise and intimidating than anything that could be achieved through shouting. Maria's reputation as the silent drill sergeant attracted attention from military training specialists who were interested in understanding how nonverbal communication could be used to improve recruit training. Several research studies were conducted on her methods, though the researchers were never told about the circumstances that had led to her silence. The effectiveness of Maria's training methods led to her promotion and recognition within the military training community, but she never felt satisfaction from her professional success because she knew that her silence was based on a promise to honor soldiers whose deaths were not being acknowledged. Her achievements felt hollow because they were built on a foundation of secrecy and denial. Maria's investigation into the Echo 7 mission and her attempts to find justice for her fallen teammates became a parallel career that she pursued during her off-duty hours. She used her access to military records and databases to research the circumstances of the mission and gather evidence that might someday be used to reveal the truth about what had happened. The research that Maria conducted over several years revealed that the Echo 7 mission had been compromised from the beginning, with intelligence sources providing false information that led the team into a trap. She discovered evidence suggesting that American intelligence assets had been betrayed by foreign agents who had infiltrated the planning process for the operation. More disturbing was Maria's discovery that the false intelligence about the Echo 7 target had been known to be unreliable by some officials within the American intelligence community, but the mission had been approved anyway because it served other strategic objectives that were considered more important than the lives of the 12 operators. Maria's investigation revealed a pattern of classified operations where American Special Operations personnel were used as expendable assets in missions that were designed to achieve political rather than military objectives. Echo 7 had been sacrificed not because their mission was essential for national security, but because their deaths would create a pretext for larger military actions that had already been planned. The evidence that Maria gathered about the Echo 7 mission and similar operations was comprehensive and damning, but she faced the problem of how to reveal information that was classified at the highest levels without violating her oath of secrecy or compromising other ongoing operations. She needed to find a way to honor her promise to the dead operators while protecting the security of current military personnel. Maria's solution was to document everything she had discovered about Echo 7 and similar operations, creating a comprehensive record that could be released if she found the right circumstances or if other evidence emerged that corroborated her findings. She prepared detailed files that could be used to expose the truth about the mission while protecting the identities of other soldiers who might be endangered by revelations about classified operations. The breakthrough that Maria had been working toward for 10 years came when a congressional investigation into intelligence failures began examining classified operations that had resulted in unusual casualty rates among special operations personnel. The investigation created an opportunity for Maria to provide information about Echo 7 without violating her security oath or endangering current operations. Maria's decision to break her silence came when she was contacted by congressional investigators who had discovered references to Echo 7 in classified documents and were seeking additional information about the operation. She realized that this was the opportunity she had been waiting for to honor her promise to her fallen teammates while exposing the truth about their unnecessary deaths. The testimony that Maria provided to congressional investigators was the first time she had spoken in 10 years, and it was emotionally devastating for her to break the silence she had maintained as a tribute to the soldiers who had died. But she knew that revealing the truth about Echo 7 was more important than maintaining her personal commitment to silence. Maria's testimony exposed not only the circumstances of the Echo 7 mission, but also a broader pattern of intelligence failures and policy decisions that had resulted in the unnecessary deaths of special operations personnel in multiple classified operations. Her evidence contributed to significant changes in how classified missions were planned and approved. The congressional investigation that Maria's testimony supported resulted in official acknowledgement of the Echo 7 mission and recognition of the 12 operators who had been killed during the operation. Their families finally learned the truth about their loved ones' deaths and received the honors and benefits that had been denied to them for over a decade. Maria's decision to speak again after 10 years of silence was not just about revealing the truth about Echo 7, but also about honoring the promise she had made to ensure that their sacrifice would be properly acknowledged. She had kept her word to the dying soldiers and had found a way to bring them the recognition they deserved. The impact of Maria's testimony extended beyond the Echo 7 case to influence policies regarding classified operations and the protection of special operations personnel who are assigned to missions with high risks and limited support. Her revelations contributed to improved oversight and accountability for operations that require soldiers to accept extraordinary risks. Maria's return to speaking was gradual and difficult, as she had become so accustomed to silence that verbal communication felt foreign and emotionally challenging. She required extensive counseling and support to readjust to using her voice, but she was motivated by the knowledge that her silence had served its purpose and that the soldiers she had promised to honor had finally received the recognition they deserved. The recognition that Maria received for her courage in maintaining her promise and eventually revealing the truth about Echo 7 included commendations for her dedication to her fallen comrades and her contribution to improving military policies. She was honored not just for her service during the mission, but for her decade-long commitment to seeking justice for her teammates. Maria's story became a case study in military ethics and the responsibilities that soldiers have to their comrades, illustrating the lengths that some individuals will go to honor promises made under extreme circumstances. Her 10 years of silence demonstrated a level of dedication and sacrifice that went far beyond normal military duty. The drill sergeant who had trained thousands of recruits in silence finally found her voice again, but only after ensuring that the voices of her fallen teammates would never be forgotten. Maria Santos had learned that sometimes the most powerful way to honor the dead is through silence, and sometimes the most important words are the ones that are never spoken until the time is right to speak for those who can no longer speak for themselves. Her voice had been the last thing that 12 soldiers heard before they died, and for 10 years she had ensured that it would not be used to perpetuate lies about their deaths. When she finally spoke again, it was to tell the truth that gave their sacrifice meaning and brought them the honor they had earned through their service and their deaths. Some promises are so sacred that they require years of sacrifice to fulfill properly, and some truths are so important that they justify any personal cost required to reveal them. Maria Santos learned that keeping faith with the dead sometimes requires the living to give up parts of themselves, and that the greatest honor we can show fallen comrades is ensuring that their sacrifice will never be forgotten or diminished by lies.